I decided to develop a camera with an exposure time of 100 years. Now, the camera is not your ordinary device. It's not your iPhone, for instance. It is, in fact, the simplest of cameras because anything complicated is liable to break, and I probably couldn't make it anyway. So what I have done, starting in Berlin, was to make a camera that is a pinhole camera. In other words, it's a camera that lets in very little light through a pinhole that is focused onto what ordinarily would be a piece of film. Well, any film is going to spoil relatively quickly. I've managed to, with my own cyanotype chemistry, make exposures that are on the order of perhaps a week. And I know people who have managed to do so, I believe, up to a couple years through various tricks. And that's well and good, but it certainly is by no means a century. So the way in which this camera works is it doesn't use ordinary film. It uses something much more common and much more simple, which is ordinary black paper. Now, if you think about a book on your coffee table, for instance, and you look at it, you'll see that it probably has started to fade, or a poster on your wall, and it will continue to do so in sunlight. Well, the same thing will happen for a piece of ordinary black paper, but if you put that paper into a camera, letting in very little light through a pinhole, what you're doing is you're projecting the scene in front of the camera, but light is projected onto the paper in a way that the paper will gradually bleach, very, very slowly, taking in an image. The image will not be static because presumably whatever you're photographing is going to change over that 100-year period. So if you think about if the camera is out in a city and there are some small houses, and those houses get torn down after 20 years, and a skyscraper gets built up in their place and is there for the next 80, just to simplify, you would see the shadow, a ghost of those houses against the bolder skyscraper, sort of like in sports photography when you see a basketball player moving very fast across a court, where the court is very boldly in place, in view, and the basketball player is sort of ghostly. And so what you end up with is not so much a photograph as you end up with a movie, all in a single frame of that full span of 100 years. Now, why that interested me in Berlin was watching the city undergoing rapid and rampant development. So incredibly fast that every time that I went back there, it was as if it were a different city. And so I started to think about how you might make a camera that would be able to take that in, that would serve as a sort of a surveillance camera in the hands of those most affected by everything that we do, all the decisions that we make, yet least powerful to make any decisions, that is to say, those not yet born. And so the idea in Berlin was to build these cameras as surveillance cameras that could be taken out into the field and hidden away, and in 100 years, the images would be brought in. So I worked with a gallery called Team Titanic. We built 100 of them. And we then made them available to anyone who wanted to take one and to hide it. If you wanted to take one, you gave a deposit of 10 euros, took a camera, hid it somewhere, anywhere that you wanted in Berlin, didn't tell anybody, except when you got to be very old. You would tell a child where you had put it, or you would write it into your will. And in 100 years, those children, then grown up, would bring the cameras back to Team Titanic, where they would get the 10 euro deposit. No guarantees about what it's worth, but nevertheless, you would get something in return, and then there would be an exhibition, 100 years of change, all in that image. And so the idea was really to engage people, to engage the children of today in a way that they were actively taking a part in putting these cameras out in the world. And not only those who were directly involved, but also those who heard about it, who read about it, and it was all over the place. We got it into the newspapers. We got a conversation going about this, that the cameras became a sort of a constant presence and remain for the next 100 years, a sort of constant presence in the city. You can think of them as sort of black boxes in that sense that are documenting and therefore are, well, it's a sort of documentary photography in the worst possible way, because documentary photographers are not supposed to interfere. These photographs manifestly do interfere because you don't know where they are, and yet you know that you could be being watched. And so the decisions that you make, you perhaps feel a little bit more accountable for those and perhaps feel some sort of a relationship to those in the far future.